The violinist's bow trembled mid-note when Leo stepped into my path. His camera strap swung against his chest, and beads of sweat traced lines down his temple despite the air conditioning pumping cold air through the church hallway. "Caroline," he whispered, his voice tight and urgent. "You need to see this. Right now. Before you walk in there." The double doors to the sanctuary stood just inches from my hand. Beyond them, 200 guests waited in polished pews, phones ready to capture every moment. My white silk bouquet trembled between my fingers. My bridesmaids lined up behind me, their chatter dying to curious whispers as they watched Leo block my path. My father squeezed my arm gently, confused but patient. Leo's phone glowed in his palm like a secret. I glanced down, ready to tell him whatever technical problem he had could wait. But the video playing on that screen froze every word in my throat. There was Daniel, my fiancé, shirtless, his arm wrapped around bare shoulders I recognized immediately. My sister's shoulders. Lila's face tilted up toward his as he whispered something that made her smile. Then his voice, clear despite the dim lighting. "Can't wait for this to be over so I can finally have you." The sound that escaped me wasn't quite a gasp, wasn't quite a scream. It was something in between, raw and broken. The bouquet slipped from my fingers and scattered across the marble floor. White roses rolled in every direction like little ghosts fleeing a crime scene. Each petal felt like a piece of my heart hitting the ground. My bridesmaids rushed forward, but I couldn't hear their concerned questions. All I could hear was Daniel's voice echoing in my head, playing on a loop. "Can't wait for this to be over." Leo's face had crumpled with genuine pain. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "I found this on the backup footage from last night's rehearsal dinner. I didn't know what to do, but I couldn't let you walk in there without knowing." Behind those heavy wooden doors, the organ began its prelude, the signal that it was my turn. My father's hand touched my shoulder, proud and oblivious. Through the crack in the doors I could see them. Daniel standing at the altar in his perfect tuxedo, that charming smile fixed in place. And beside him, Lila in her champagne bridesmaid dress, holding a bouquet I'd personally chosen for her. Both of them smiling, pretending, waiting for me to play my part in their sick little game. I straightened my spine slowly, feeling something cold and hard settle into place where my heart used to be. I wiped away a tear before it could reach my chin and ruin my makeup. My hands stopped shaking. My breathing steadied. I looked at Leo and said very quietly, "Keep filming. Everything. Don't stop recording no matter what happens in there." He blinked at me, confused. "Caroline, you don't have to. Keep filming," I repeated, my voice stronger now. Then I bent down and gathered the scattered roses, rebuilding my bouquet with steady hands. My bridesmaids stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Or maybe I'd finally found it. My name is Caroline Brooks, and that was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The day I'd finally step out from under my younger sister's shadow. The day my mother would actually see me, not through me but really see me, and recognize that her eldest daughter was worthy of love. But standing there with that video burning in my memory, I realized something true and terrible. I had never been chosen. Not by my family. Not by Daniel. Not by anyone who mattered. 2 months earlier, I'd been standing in my mother's living room trying on my wedding dress. I'd saved for a year to afford it. Every dollar earned from my graphic design work, every bonus carefully tucked away. The dress fit perfectly, elegant and simple, making me feel beautiful for the first time in forever. Lila had shown up unannounced, claiming she wanted to help me choose a veil. She'd gasped when she saw me, her hands flying dramatically to her mouth. "Oh my God, Carrie, you look." She'd paused just long enough to make it hurt. "Mature." The word landed like a stone. My mother had laughed, actually laughed like it was the kindest compliment. "Well, you are the older sister, sweetie. Mature is perfect for you." Daniel had been there too, sprawled on the couch scrolling through his phone. He'd barely glanced up. "You look great," he'd said in that flat, distracted tone he used when he wasn't really paying attention. I told myself it was just wedding stress. But when Lila sat down beside him on that couch and he didn't move away, something in my chest had tightened with a warning I'd ignored. The wedding rehearsal had been worse. My mother spent the entire evening fussing over Lila's hair instead of helping me practice my vows. "Your sister photographs so beautifully," she'd gushed, adjusting Lila's curls for the third time. "The camera just loves her naturally." Lila had winked at Daniel during our practice walkthrough, and he'd laughed. A real laugh, the kind he used to give me back when we first started dating. My best friend Harper had nudged me hard. "You're seeing that too, right?" "I'm not crazy." I'd smiled through clenched teeth. "I see it. But I'll handle it." That was the first moment I'd decided something important. No one was ever going to humiliate me again. I just hadn't known yet how badly they already had. Later that night, back at the hotel, Daniel had kissed my forehead distractedly. "Big day tomorrow," he'd said. "Get some rest." Then he'd left for his bachelor party. I'd watched him go, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach, trying to convince myself that cold feeling spreading through my chest was just pre-wedding jitters, nothing more. That morning, hours before Leo stopped me in that hallway, Lila had walked into my bridal suite uninvited. She'd been wearing a champagne-colored dress that matched my wedding palette a little too perfectly. "You nervous?" she'd asked, picking up my lipstick and applying it to her own mouth like it belonged to her. Like everything in my life belonged to her. I'd watched her in the mirror, studying the way she moved through my space like a queen visiting peasant territory. "A little," I'd admitted. She'd smiled at my reflection, and something in that smile had made my skin crawl. "Don't worry. Mom told me not to upstage you today. You're the bride after all." The way she said bride made it sound like a participation trophy. Something given out of pity rather than earned. I'd smiled back at her and said softly, "Thank you, Lila, for everything." Because even then, some part of me had known. Some buried instinct had recognized the knife hidden behind her sugar-sweet words. I just hadn't wanted to believe my own sister could be that cruel. Now, standing with Leo's phone still glowing in my memory, I knew better. Quiet anger, I'd learned in that moment, was the most dangerous kind. The organ music swelled as the doors opened. My father squeezed my arm one last time. "Ready, sweetheart." I nodded, though ready wasn't the right word. Steady was better. Determined. The phone with the video evidence now rested tucked into the ribbon wrap of my bouquet. Hidden but close. A secret heartbeat pressed against my palm. As I stepped into the sanctuary, 200 faces turned toward me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People always gasped at brides. Phones lifted to capture this perfect moment. Daniel stood at the altar looking flawless in his tuxedo, that practiced smile in place. And beside him, Lila held her bridesmaid bouquet with both hands, her expression picture-perfect innocence. Each step down that aisle felt heavier than the last. My heels clicked against marble like a countdown. My father walked beside me, proud and beaming, completely unaware that he was escorting his daughter toward her own public execution. By the time we reached the front, something had shifted inside me. My heart wasn't breaking anymore. It was hardening, crystallizing into something sharp and useful. I wasn't the trembling bride they expected. I was an actress walking into the final scene of a play I was about to rewrite. The officiant began speaking, his voice warm and practiced. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Caroline and Daniel." But I wasn't listening to his words. I was watching Daniel's face, seeing him clearly for the first time. The way his eyes flickered toward Lila every few seconds. The way his smile looked painted on. The way he shifted his weight like he was already planning his escape. My father had stepped back, joining my mother in the front pew. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, performing emotion for the cameras. When it came time for the vows, the officiant turned to me. "Caroline, do you take this man?" "Before I promise my forever," I interrupted, my voice surprisingly steady, "I have something to share with everyone here." A ripple of confusion spread through the pews. Daniel frowned at me, his smile faltering. Caroline, what are you? I raised one finger, silencing him. You promised me honesty, didn't you, Daniel? On the day you proposed. You said our marriage would be built on truth. I nodded toward Leo, who stood frozen by his camera near the back. Leo, would you mind helping me share that truth with everyone? Leo understood immediately. He moved to the projector we'd set up for the reception slideshow, the one that was supposed to show photos of Daniel and me throughout our relationship. His hands shook as he connected my phone to the system. The screen behind the altar flickered to life. The sanctuary went silent except for the soft hum of the projector. Then the video played. No sound at first, just the image of Daniel shirtless, Lila in his arms, both of them tangled together in a way that left no room for doubt. Then the audio kicked in. Daniel's voice filled the church. Can't wait for this to be over so I can finally have you. Lila's laugh in response. Poor Carrie. She has no idea. More laughter. Gasps erupted from the pews like bombs going off. My mother's hand flew to her chest. Somewhere behind me, Harper started crying. Lila's face drained of all color, her bouquet dropping from nerveless fingers. Daniel lunged toward me, his careful mask shattering. Caroline, wait, that's not. But I was already stepping back, my veil slipping from my head as I moved. I looked at the crowd calmly. Now, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. You may all sit down. I walked out of that church to the sound of whispers exploding into full conversations and camera shutters clicking like applause. Daniel had invited reporters. He loved publicity, loved being seen as successful and enviable. The irony would have been funny if my chest didn't feel like it was caving in. Behind me, voices rose in a wave of shock and anger. My mother's voice cut through the noise. Caroline, how could you humiliate your sister like this? I stopped and turned slowly. My mother stood in the doorway, her face red, her hand gripping Lila's arm protectively. Even now, even caught on camera betraying me, Lila was still the one my mother rushed to defend. Funny, I said, my voice cold and clear. I thought humiliation was Lila's specialty. But I guess she learned from the best. The reporters pressed closer, phones extended. I ignored them. The limo driver opened the car door. I'd prepaid for everything, another reminder that I'd built this entire wedding myself. I slid inside without looking back. Through the tinted window, I watched Daniel drop to his knees beside Lila. My entire family clustered around them, not me. Hurt. God, it hurt worse than anything. But it was also the last time I'd let their rejection break me. The last time I'd cry over people who never chose me first. 3 weeks later, I was living in a one-bedroom apartment above a coffee shop in a different part of the city. Boxes were stacked against the walls like bricks, most of them still unpacked. The tabloids had devoured the story, chewed it up, and spat it out in 100 different headlines. Online, I'd become the runaway bride who exposed her cheater Liv. Some people called me brave. Others called me cruel. I'd stopped reading the comments. Leo had sent me the uncut footage from that night. Everything his cameras had captured. Keep it, he'd written in the email. You'll want proof when they start rewriting the story to make themselves look better. He was right. My mother had already called once, her voice tight with false concern. Caroline, honey, we need to talk about how you're going to apologize. Lila is devastated. Daniel's family is threatening to sue for defamation. This has gotten completely out of hand. I'd hung up without responding. Then I'd sat down at my laptop and started a new document. I titled it Receipts. Inside, I began listing every person Daniel still owed money to for the wedding that never happened. Every deposit I'd paid. Every vendor I'd contacted. Every invoice still outstanding. I'd been the organizer, the one who handled the details while Daniel posed for photos and Lila played the supportive sister. Now, those details would become my weapons. The florist called first. Miss Brooks, I'm so sorry to bother you, but there's still the matter of the balance. Send the invoice directly to Daniel's company, I said calmly. He authorized all the expenses. I have the emails to prove it. I did have those emails. Kept everything. Then came the caterer, the decorator, the string quartet, the photographer who wasn't Leo. Each one got the same answer. Bill Daniels' business. Within a week, he owed over $40,000 in overdue wedding expenses, all suddenly hitting his company accounts at once. Meanwhile, Lila had started posting carefully curated photos on social media. Her in soft lighting, looking wounded and beautiful. Captions about healing from betrayal and learning to forgive yourself. The comments were split, half supporting her, half calling her a homewrecker. I didn't post anything. I didn't comment. I didn't engage. I just watched and waited, because I'd learned something important in those 3 weeks. Silence, when used correctly, could be louder than any scandal. People were curious about why I wasn't talking. That curiosity would eventually work in my favor. 2 weeks later, Lila appeared on a podcast. I listened to it while unpacking boxes in my new apartment. Her voice trembled with practiced emotion. The thing people don't understand is that I never meant for any of this to happen, she said, sniffling delicately. Caroline and I grew up competing for everything. She was always jealous of me, always trying to prove she was better. When Daniel and I fell in love, it wasn't planned. You can't help who your heart chooses. The host made sympathetic noises. And how do you feel about how she exposed you? Honestly. Lila's voice broke perfectly. I'm just sad for her. She was always so insecure. I think she saw this as her chance to finally be the center of attention, even if it meant destroying our family. My phone exploded with texts. Relatives, old friends, even Daniel's business partners. Everyone wanted to know if I'd heard it. Everyone wanted my side. I gave none of them a response. Instead, I wrote a calm, detailed email to the podcast host. In it, I included a timeline of Daniel's relationship with me, complete with dated photos and receipts. Then I added one small, devastating detail. A bank statement showing that Daniel had bought my engagement ring using a credit card in Lila's name. He'd proposed to me with jewelry purchased on my sister's credit. The podcast host called me within an hour. The follow-up episode aired 3 days later. This time, the host presented my timeline alongside Lila's interview. After speaking with Caroline Brooks, some inconsistencies have come to light. They played clips of Lila's tearful explanation, then contrasted them with documented facts. The engagement ring purchased on her credit card 2 months before Daniel officially broke up with his previous girlfriend. Text messages between Lila and Daniel starting 6 months before he proposed to me. Credit card receipts showing they'd taken a business trip together while Daniel told me he was visiting his parents. By the time the episode ended, the narrative had shifted completely. Lila's tears looked like theater now. Her unplanned love story looked like a calculated affair. The comments section filled with people apologizing to me for believing her version. That night Daniel called. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail he left. His voice cracked halfway through, raw with desperation. Carrie, please, we need to talk. It's not what you think. Messed up. I know I messed up. But we can fix this. Just, please don't ruin me. That last part, don't ruin me, was the most honest thing he'd ever said. I saved the voicemail. Not out of sentiment. Just as evidence. Then my mother texted. Lila is devastated. You've made your point. Enough. Enough. That word echoed in my head. For her, the pain had always been enough when it was mine. Daniel's company was hosting its annual charity gala in early December, a showpiece event he used to impress investors and court new business. I knew every vendor involved. I'd helped him plan the first 3 galas we'd attended as a couple. I knew the layout, the guest list, the schedule. So when I showed up wearing the white dress I'd never gotten to walk in, the reception dress I'd bought for after the ceremony, cameras exploded. Gasps followed me through the entrance like a wave. Daniel froze mid-conversation with a potential investor, his champagne glass stopping halfway to his mouth. Lila stood beside him in a glittering silver gown, wearing what looked suspiciously like the diamond necklace he'd given me for our second anniversary. The host, a cheerful woman named Patricia, welcomed everyone and began the donation requests. "We're hoping to raise $50,000 tonight for the children's literacy program." I waited until she finished her pitch. Then I stood up. "I'd like to contribute," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the ballroom. The room went silent. Daniel's face drained of color. I walked to the front with an envelope in my hand. In fact, I've already contributed quite a bit to Daniel's various ventures. I thought it was time to make that contribution public. I handed Patricia the envelope. Inside were copies of every unpaid invoice from our wedding, $47,632, all billed to Daniel's corporation, all now part of public record thanks to the small claims court filings I'd submitted that morning. Patricia opened the envelope, confused. Her expression shifted as she read, her professional smile freezing in place. The room buzzed with whispers. Daniel lunged toward me, his careful composure cracking. "Caroline, what the hell are you doing?" "Charity," I said simply. "Isn't that what tonight is about? Giving to those who need it." I turned to the crowd. Daniel's company owes $47,000 to small business owners, florists, caterers, musicians, for a wedding that never happened because he was too busy sleeping with my sister. I thought everyone should know where their potential investments might actually go. Toward paying off his personal debts instead of the children's literacy program. The crowd erupted. Phones came out. Investors started moving toward the exits. Lila grabbed Daniel's arm, whispering frantically in his ear, but he shook her off. "You can't do this," he hissed at me. I raised my champagne glass. "To honesty," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "And transparency in business." Then I walked out of that gala with my head high while Daniel's carefully constructed empire started crumbling behind me. Outside, in the December cold, I let myself smile for the first time in weeks. The next morning, Leo showed up at my apartment with coffee and an external hard drive. "I didn't give the media everything," he said, settling into my one kitchen chair. "But I think you might want this." He pushed the hard drive across the table. I connected it to my laptop. Inside were video files I'd never seen. Raw footage from the days leading up to the wedding. Lila mocking my dress during the fittings when she thought the cameras were off. God, could she look any more desperate, she'd laughed. Daniel calling me boring but reliable, while talking to his groomsmen. Their shared laughter, casual and cruel, as they joked about how clueless I was. I watched all of it with a cold, clinical detachment. Each clip was a confirmation of what I'd suspected but never wanted to believe. Leo watched me watch them. "They used you, Caroline," he said quietly. "Maybe it's time you used the footage back." I shook my head slowly. "No, not yet." He studied me for a long moment. "You don't want revenge. You want clarity." He was wrong. I wanted both. But more than that, I wanted control. Control over my own narrative. Control over my own life. And that meant being strategic about when and how I used what I knew. I opened my own event planning company in January. Brooks & Company, funded partly by money from freelance design work and partly by the settlement Daniel had been forced to pay me for breach of contract. He'd signed papers making him financially responsible for the wedding regardless of whether it happened. Every contact who'd worked with Daniel over the years reached out when they heard. His former clients, his vendors, even some of his investors. The business community loved stories of resilience. And mine was spreading. Meanwhile, Lila tried to launch an influencer brand, posting aspirational content about healing and self-love. But the sponsorships dried up after the charity gala debacle. Turns out companies didn't want to be associated with homewreckers, even pretty ones with good lighting. Daniel's firm began losing clients. Small ones at first, then bigger accounts. Each one quietly redirected their business to my company instead. By March, his biggest annual contract was up for renewal. I submitted a competitive proposal under a business pseudonym, backed by client testimonials he couldn't match. I won the contract. When the client found out Brooks and Company was my company, they didn't care. My proposal had been better. My reputation was better. For the first time, I understood that revenge didn't always need to look like fire and destruction. Sometimes it looked like success delivered with a professional smile and a firm handshake. The invitation arrived in April. Ivory paper, sealed with gold wax. My name written in elaborate calligraphy. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Lila and Daniel invite you to celebrate their engagement. They were actually doing it. Getting married. Rebranding their scandal as a redemptive love story. Love conquers all and finding happiness against the odds. The wedding date was set for June 15th. My original wedding date. The venue was the same church where I'd exposed them. The audacity of it stole my breath. My mother's note was tucked inside the invitation, written on her personal stationery. Time heals all wounds, Caroline. Please come and support your sister. Family should forgive. That word again. Forgive. As if forgiveness was something owed rather than earned. As if showing up to watch them celebrate their betrayal was somehow my responsibility. I sat at my kitchen table for an hour, just staring at that invitation. Then I picked up a pen and checked the RSVP card. Attending with pleasure. I dropped it in the mail that afternoon. If they wanted me there, I'd be there. But not as the broken, humiliated sister. As something else entirely. The morning of their wedding, I woke up early and got ready with careful precision. Hair styled professionally. Makeup perfect. I wore a dress that was elegant but not attention-seeking. Midnight blue, simple lines, nothing that would distract. But I looked good. I looked like someone who'd spent the last 8 months building a new life. Which I had. Leo met me at the church an hour before the ceremony. He carried a sleek black case that definitely wasn't a camera. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. He nodded. "More sure than I've ever been." Inside the case was a compact projector and a tablet loaded with files. Among the guests already arriving, I recognized Daniel's investors, several business partners, and a journalist named Marcus who'd covered the original wedding disaster with surprising fairness. I'd made sure they were all invited. Leo sat up near the back, his equipment looking like standard videography gear to anyone who didn't look closely. Lila arrived in a vintage car, her dress a cascade of white lace. Daniel waited at the altar looking smug and reborn, like he'd successfully erased the past and rewritten himself as the romantic hero. They had no idea what was coming. The lights dimmed as the ceremony began. The music started, the same prelude that had once led me down that aisle toward heartbreak. Lila glided forward, her train trailing behind her like a river of silk. She looked beautiful. She always had. That had never been the problem. Daniel watched her approach with an expression I recognized. The same one he'd worn when I walked toward him 8 months ago. Adoration mixed with performance. Love that looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow when you got too close. The officiant raised his hands to begin. That's when the lights dimmed further, and a new image filled the space behind the altar. Not the security footage from 8 months ago. Something different. The projector showed financial documents, bank statements, credit card bills, all in Daniel's name, all showing massive debt, gambling losses, luxury purchases, loans taken out using company funds. Then came the real bombshell. Documents proving that Daniel had embezzled from his own company's charity fund to pay for this wedding. $70,000 meant for children's literacy programs, redirected to pay for the venue, the dress, the reception. Gasps rose through the church like thunder. Daniel spun around, his face going from tan to white in seconds. Lila stepped back, her bouquet trembling. "What is this?" she whispered. I didn't move from my seat. I just spoke, my voice calm and clear in the sudden silence. "The truth. You wanted a love story, but I thought everyone deserved to see the real plot." Daniel's eyes found mine across the church. "You," he breathed. "How could you? How could I?" I stood up slowly. "You stole charity money to throw yourself a wedding. You destroyed your own company's reputation. I'm just making sure everyone knows before they invest any more money in your lies. Lila's face crumpled, but this time her tears looked real. Daniel, is this true? He didn't answer. He was too busy staring at the documents projected behind him, each one a nail in his coffin. Security started moving toward the projector, but it was too late. Leo had synced everything to broadcast. Every reporter's phone in the room was now receiving copies of the documents. There was no covering this up. You called this a love story, I continued, my voice steady. I'm just showing everyone the credits. All the people you had to step on and steal from to make it happen. The sanctuary erupted. Guests talking over each other. Investors making phone calls. The journalist Marcus furiously taking notes. This wasn't just gossip anymore. This was fraud. My mother pushed through the crowd, her face twisted with fury. How dare you do this to your sister? She hissed the words, loud enough for people nearby to hear. I met her eyes calmly. Funny. I thought you might ask how Daniel dared to do this to all the children who won't get books this year because he stole their funding. Her face went pale. That's not. It's all documented, Mom. Every transaction. Every forged signature on the charity account. Did you know he signed your name on one of the withdrawal forms? That's your signature authorizing the transfer of $20,000. I pulled out a paper from my purse and handed it to her. It was a copy of a bank transfer form with her signature, or rather, a forged version of it. She stared at it, her hand shaking. Around us, whispers sharpened like knives. You paid him, someone muttered. She was in on it. My mother's perfect posture finally crumbled. For once in her life, she had no defense. No way to spin this into something that made her look good. She'd spent my entire life protecting the wrong people. Now everyone could see it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was doing all the work. Security escorted Daniel and Lila out through a side door, but the damage was already done. Phones had captured everything. By the time they reached the parking lot, the story was already trending online. Charity fraud exposed during wedding ceremony. I walked out through the front entrance. Microphones surged toward me as reporters recognized me from 8 months ago. Miss Brooks, were you aware these financial crimes were happening? One called out. I paused and turned to face them. The cameras focused and I felt strangely calm. I didn't destroy anyone, I said clearly. I just stopped protecting them. There's a difference. That line became a headline within an hour. By evening, Daniel's company's stocks had crashed. His sponsors pulled out. An investigation was launched into the charity fund. Lila's remaining social media presence evaporated as sponsors and followers disappeared. Every carefully constructed piece of their lives fell apart while I watched from the safety of my new apartment. For the first time in 8 months, I slept through the entire night without waking up from nightmares. The next morning I sat down and started writing. 1 week after their failed wedding, I posted a video. Not scandal. Not revenge. Just me sitting in my apartment talking to the camera. I told my story from the beginning. How love had become currency in my family. How I'd spent years trying to earn approval that was never coming. How silence had nearly destroyed me from the inside out. I didn't name anyone specifically. I didn't have to. The world filled in the blanks themselves. But the video wasn't angry. It was sad and raw and honest. I used to think revenge meant making them hurt as much as they hurt me, I said near the end. But real revenge is building a life so good that their opinions stop mattering. Messages flooded in. Thousands of them. Strangers sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Daughters who'd been scapegoated. Siblings who'd been overshadowed. People who understood what it meant to finally choose themselves. 3 months later, Brooks & Company had expanded to 3 employees. 6 months after that, I was featured in a business magazine. 1 year later, I stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean with Leo beside me. He was filming again, but this time for a documentary about rebuilding after public betrayal. Any regrets? He asked. I thought about it honestly. About the wedding that never happened. About the family who chose someone else. About the year of pain that had led to this moment of peace. No, I said finally. They taught me what I didn't want to be. And that was the greatest gift they could have given me. I never heard from Lila or Daniel again. My mother sent one email months later, asking if we could move past this. I never responded. That silence, I realized, was the loudest answer of all.